record. Okay, so let me type it out. If you're not sure what we have learned the earlier lesson, okay, I believe all of you have experienced something with me, right? So I was covered in the first lesson with me. Without looking at your notes, of course. Can you utilize the chat function? Oh yes, I forgot. Okay, the faster you guys participate, okay, there is a good chance that we are going to end before time. But if I have to ask more than once, then it obviously is going to eat into our dismissal time, right? Okay, so I'm counting on all your participation. Okay, so we have learned the PPC curve. Okay, we also learned the FOB. Try not to refer to your notes. Okay, remember, recap is based on what you learn, not what you read. Hey, yeah. Okay, so anybody knows what is PPC? Hey, just now I was asking the year 2, what is PPC? None of them can tell me what is PPC. How do we spell PPC out? And what is FOP? Okay, just now someone brought up factor of production. So what is PPC? See? Production possibility curve. Good, DY. Production possibility curve. So now let's go a little bit about PPC, because PPC was the concept that was covered last week. So remember, what is the shape of PPC? What was the C word that was used last week? Okay, concave. Right, Raphael, you can try to type it out. Yeah. Okay. And okay, a concave is a bowl-shaped curve, right? Okay, why is it concave, or why is it bowl-shaped? I believe I illustrated the concept last week. Why is it a bowl shape? How come? Because of, remember, when we move down along the PPC, we simply have to give up one good for the production of the other good, right? So this tells us that we are going to incur what?
Is it opportunity cost?
Yes, of course, great. Okay, and when we move down more and more, it simply means that we need to give up more and more. Okay, so we are going to incur increasing opportunity cost. Alright, so, oh yes, I forgot. Okay, for the year ones, okay, if you have a block test or a common test or whatever test that's coming up, please keep me posted. Okay, so I am your best bet to promote. And all these weighted assignments will add into your promotion. Okay, so the very first one that's going to be coming up, why am I sharing this? It's because of this. Okay, you're likely to be tested on PPC and demand and supply. Yeah, okay, so don't forget. So having said that, okay, I have prepared a quiz for all of you. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the chat function. You guys can join. And we will access how much have you still remembered about PPC. Okay, so the good news is there will be no punishment for anyone that doesn't pass this. The bad news is there will also be no present for anyone who got full marks. Okay, but anyway, just try your best, and I'll need you to specifically take down the questions that you get wrong. Okay? Later on, we will see whether we have a chance to address any gaps down here. So with that, I wish you guys all the best and go ahead and fight it out. Ready? Let's go. Remember to expand my screen, Alright, read the question carefully. The question mention that they are equally productive in production of these two goods. So remember last week I covered a variation, right, of a straight line PPC. A straight line PPC tells you that there is perfect capital or perfect labor mobility. It means that the factor of production is equally skilled at producing the two goods. That's why they won't incur a higher opportunity cost. So read the question carefully, yeah. Alright, so finite resource will lead to scarcity. Okay, that's a central economic problem. Okay? Okay, well done, DY.
It's a bit blurry.
Oh, okay. Right, thanks for highlighting. I'll see how I can expand that. Okay, but basically, C is the correct answer. Okay, meaning to say that there's only one of the option that has labor. Okay, and it was seen, you actually read in the earlier on preamble that there is a lack of skilled workers. Okay, labor is required. Okay, you may want to blow up my screen. Okay, I see what I can do to enhance the display. I cannot blow up the screen. Cannot blow up the image. So sorry. Right. Okay, it seems like okay, we'll address question 4 together. Okay, with the diagram. I'll show you how to illustrate with a diagram later. Okay, there's no way that I can backtrack down here. Okay, question 4, no go. Okay, we covered this last week. Okay, so it follows with choices and opportunity cost incurred. Okay, what is likely to be introduced in the market for bus travel if an economy move from mixed economy to a market economy? Yeah, I did not cover different economies earlier on, okay, but don't think it will be tested, but it's a fun question to do. Okay, so essentially market economy means hands-off approach by the government. Hands-off. Okay, you realize that the other illustrations such as a subsidy, okay, providing free school bus, all these are hands-on approach, okay, from a mixed economy. Okay, so the other polarity of between mix is between command and control and market. Okay, so I did not cover this, but it's not difficult and won't be really tested. Okay, 3 more questions to go. Okay, I covered positive and normative last week. Okay, for those who got wrong, okay, be careful. Positive, okay, it means that they are factual, objective statements. Normative, okay, subjective, okay, cannot be tested. Okay, only A is the correct answer. Underutilization. Yeah, you have questions for me. You can. This one is tricky. You got to look carefully. If you have questions for me, you can address that later. Okay, I will address some of. It seems like the graphical questions are a bit trickier. Okay, I'll address all the graph questions. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So earlier on, the graph questions are all tricky, right? Okay, so for this question, let me see if I can blow this up. This is the max, I'm so sorry. Alright, okay, we can actually see that, okay, after a technological progress has happened, your PPC curve will expand outwards, right? Okay, so we are actually at this point. Okay, I don't know whether you guys can see my cursor. So in order to produce OX amount of consumer good, okay, what must we forsake? Okay, so this is what the question is asking. For OX amount of good, you see OX is here, right? Okay, we just move it to the right side, OX. Okay, if you still recall what I've covered last week, okay, number one, the easiest way to look at that is, okay, at the slope of your PPC. So essentially, in order to produce OX of consumer good, we need to give up MH amount of capital goods, okay, in order to produce OX amount of consumer good. So this is one way to look at that. Okay, so it's all about the slope on the PPC. Okay, if not, you can make deduction by going slow and looking at, okay, this dotted line. You can just bring OX across, OX, okay, and MH. I'm not able to annotate here, I'm so sorry. Likewise, if you have questions for this, if you are still not sure, okay, you can stay back during the break and ask. Okay, so diagram. Okay, you can actually see that Q is the correct answer. Anything that is inside is unused or inefficient use of resource. Okay, the rest are pretty much especially point C. The country will be better off producing an R and S. Okay, both of these are actually on the PPC curve itself. You see that? So there is no right or wrong. Okay, it just depends on, okay, what is the choice of the economy. Okay, this is the hardest question. Okay, I want you all to focus. Alright, so the opportunity cost of producing one additional desk. Okay, I want you all to focus. Okay, if we want to produce one additional desk, let's move here. Okay, right now, okay, at the third, okay, at this point, okay, can you all see my cursor? Okay, we are producing 3 desks and 4 chairs. Can you all see that in my cursor? Yes? 3 desks and 4 chairs. So remember, if we want to produce 1 additional chair or 1 additional desk, okay, we shift it outwards, right? And we know that this is scarcity, right? Can we produce there beyond the PPC? We can't. Okay, and therefore we have to give up 1 chair. Okay, so from this point, this is scarcity. If we want to produce 1 additional desk, we need to give up 1 chair. Okay, so the amount of chair that they have give up, okay, will be from 4 chairs to 3 chairs. Therefore, you see that this is the opportunity cost of the 4th desk. Okay, 3rd to 4th. So let's move on from the 4th to 5th. Okay, if you want to produce an additional desk, okay, so let's look here. We are at this point. Okay, at this point, we are producing 4 desks and 3 chairs. Okay, is everyone following me at my cursor? So if you were to produce an additional desk, okay, which is at this point, which is beyond your PPC, can we produce there? We can't, right? Because of scarcity. So we need to give up how many chairs? Okay, we need to give up 3 chairs. Okay, in order to be producing on the curve itself. Okay, so the opportunity cost for the 5th chair or 5th desk is 3 chairs. Okay, so let me repeat. Okay, so we're at this point. If we were to shift outwards, producing the 5th desk, we need to give up 3 chairs. Okay, so this is a very concise revision on opportunity cost. Okay, unfortunately, it seems like it's not very promising. Okay, so let's see how we can bring in more revision on opportunity cost. Okay, so with that, okay, I'm going to move on to today's objective. So today we'll be learning about demand and supply. Okay, I'm going to toggle back. Alright, just like a quick show of hands, have anyone learned demand and supply already? Not yet. DY, yes? Raphael? Okay, so I'm slightly ahead of school. So don't be too concerned about the outcome today. Okay, since I'm ahead, I will be a bit more gentle. Let me see if I can I can shift some of the things to the next lesson. The next lesson will also be on demand and supply, will be on the recap. Okay, so don't be too concerned. It's perfectly okay if you're lost. Okay, so let's set a goal for ourselves. Our goal for today, okay, is to absorb up to 50%. If you can get 50% out of today, I think it's good enough. Okay, and next week we'll complete another 50% to make it 100. Okay, and meanwhile, if your school is concurrently covering demand and supply, you will work on a dual track basis pretty well. Okay, whatever that you learn here, you can apply in school. Whatever you learn in school, you can apply here. Good? Okay, so I have 11 objectives here. I may cut a few, I'm not sure. Okay, so with that, okay, I will quickly illustrate this. We'll look at definitions of demand. Okay, I will illustrate the diagram drawing part. Okay, I may need you to draw with me. Okay, I will illustrate the difference between demand and quantity demanded. Okay, this is exceptionally crucial. Okay, I will illustrate the determinants of demand. Okay, next week I will recap on that. Don't be too concerned. Okay, there will always be a recap. Okay, then I'll be looking at supply, definition of supply. Okay, I'll guide you on the diagram drawing. I'll illustrate the difference between supply and quantity supplied. Okay, so having illustrating the first 7 objectives, then the determinants of supply. So sorry. Determinants of supply. Okay, 4 and 8 are also crucial. Okay, I'll share with you a framework that we use internally. Okay, for our students. Okay, point 9 on equilibrium is exceptionally crucial as well. Okay, we'll be placing the demand and the supply curve together. Okay, in order to find out two objectives. Okay, I'll share with you that in a short while. Price adjustment process, I'll see if time permits, and after that, okay, we'll go on to exam purpose. How is it going to be tested? So don't be too concerned. All these will be repeated next lesson. Clear? Okay, I reckon that some of you have some prior experience, so that's good. Okay, you can do a good recap on that. Okay, at the end of the session, I will show you a case study, okay, on how to what are some of the demand and supply questions are likely to be. Okay, so with that, okay, I want you to look at page 3, everyone. Okay, are you all at page 3? Okay, I want you all to focus on these two. Okay, these two are the demand and supply definitions. Okay, so make sure you memorize the definition. Okay, so things to look out for. Demand, okay, this is the amount that consumers are willing and able to buy, okay, at various price level, okay, over a given time period. Ceteris paribus. You have to assume ceteris paribus. For students who don't use ceteris paribus, I will minus marks. Okay, I've mentioned this last week. Ceteris paribus is an important assumption. Okay, later on I will illustrate law of demand, okay, with the diagram illustration. Okay, so unfortunately I do have, okay, the diagram here, but I don't want to use this diagram. Okay, I want you guys to join me to observe together. Okay, I don't want to confuse you with these two. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the diagram. So if you like, okay, you can exercise your hand. Okay, take out a writing pad and join me. Okay, it will help you a lot more and you will be more confident when you draw. Okay, I have mentioned this before. Okay, only with the exception of PPC, which is a too good economy. Okay, your y-axis will be good A and your x-axis will be good B or something like that, right? Yes? Okay, so primarily through the coursework in your entire economic syllabus, okay, we will be using this model, okay, of price and quantity. Okay, you will see this come up very often, so please do not label this wrongly. The y-axis will be price and the x-axis will be quantity. Okay, so this is the very first step of illustrating a demand curve. Later on we'll put in the supply curve and we'll find out the price and quantity. So the next thing, okay, before you guys forget everything, is to tell me, okay, what is the shape of the demand curve? Although we say that it's a curve, okay, but we are going to simplify that. Okay, we are going to assume that your demand is a downward sloping curve, downward sloping line. You can assume it to be linear. You can assume, simple assumption. Okay, just like what the definition tells you, the demand curve tells you the willingness and ability to buy goods and services at every various price, okay, along the demand curve, right? Okay, so we can see, for instance, I'll just use a hypothetical figure here. Okay, $1. Okay, let's say, okay, if Milo Pink is $1. I'm not sure whether international audience know what is Milo Pink. Okay, ice Milo. Okay, 1. Okay, and we can see that when your price goes down, okay, your quantity increase. Okay, so this is a simple illustration. Normally we don't use numbers on the y-axis. Normally we don't. Okay, I'm just showing you for illustration purpose, especially if you're very new to econs. So maybe you guys will want to try. Okay, why is it that when price decreases, quantity demanded increases? Okay, based on your own understanding. If you go to layman, if you hear your mom and dad discussing economics, they will say, what, because it's cheaper, right? and buy more, right? Okay, in economics, okay, it's very specific. Okay, we have a few definitive jargons that we'll be illustrating. Forgive me if because I'm nursing a very bad cold. Okay, my voice is not fully back. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how it looks like. Okay, so from the diagram perspective, this is what we call a movement. Okay, I want you all to be careful here. Movement. Okay, it's a movement along your demand curve. And to be more specific, you can see this like a two-stage process. Okay, initially when there's a fall in price, okay, this is stage 1, quantity demanded will go up. This is stage 2. Okay, so if we were to piece these two stages up, okay, it will be a downward movement along your demand curve. Okay, and make sure you label your demand curve properly. Okay, you can call it D, DD, whatever. So why is it downward sloping? Okay, it won't be really tested, but I will share with you some examples here, or some of the factors. Like I've said, it won't be really tested. Okay, the first one is income factor. Okay, instead of coffee shop layman term, okay, or it becomes cheaper, okay, the income factor will help to illustrate why quantity demanded goes up. Okay, so for instance, you have $100. Remember, income factor down here, okay, does not illustrate that there is a change in income. Okay, it illustrates a change in price. So initially, let's say if you are buying Milo Peng, okay, or Ice Milo, okay, or $1, we can purchase 100 cups, right? But when, hey, why am I, crap, I'm so sorry, nobody caught me sleeping here. Okay, when price goes down, it should be 50 cents. It cannot be $2. Make sense? And when it goes down, it should be cheaper. I'm so sorry, but you guys also need to wake up. Mr. Teo is not always right. Okay, anything that Mr. Teo, okay, you catch Mr. Teo napping, please wake him up. Okay, like I say, I'm still a bit drowsy because of the drugs. Okay, so if Milo Peng or Ice Milo becomes 50 cents, okay, how many cups can we afford here?
200.
200, yes. So we can actually see that, okay, because of a fall in price, consumers, okay, experience a higher purchasing power, and there is no change in income. Okay, the other factor that is going to matter later on together is what we call the substitution effect. Okay, this will be combined with another factor that I will be showing in a while. So in a nutshell, okay, when Milo Peng is cheaper, okay, it simply means that the consumer will buy more Milo Peng, okay, or Milo Ice, and they will actually cut back on their other consumption of a related good. So can you guys name me what is a substitute of Ice Milo to you? What is a substitute? Do you all drink Ice Milo? Yeah, so what do you think is a relatively close substitute to Ice Milo to you?
Iced tea.
Maybe tea, okay. So later on we'll illustrate that there is going to be a fall in demand for tea. Okay, so if you ever forget what I'm saying here, please don't forget, okay, that when we are looking at the demand curve, okay, there are two categories that we want to look at. Okay, movement and shift. Okay, so when there are price changes, okay, please pen this down. Price changes, or what I call price factor, it is always a movement along the demand curve. Okay, please pen this down. Movement and shift is very important. If you can't get this correct, okay, your subsequent concepts will be all haywire. Okay, so remember, whenever there's change in price, okay, it's what we call a price factor. It will always lead to a movement along your demand or supply curve. Okay, so The next thing is it necessary that it is one-sided? It's going to be downward. It's going to point downwards only. Okay, can it be the other way around? Okay, it can. Okay, economics is not so rigid. Okay, so when there's an increase in price, quantity demanded will fall. Okay, so I'm just going to flip all the arrows. Now I'm going to go through something a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go through the other sister or the better half of this. Okay, so this one I probably need the book. Okay, so I want you guys to look at page 4. Okay, and you can actually see that down here I use non-price factor. Okay, so I'm going to show you in a diagram how it looks like. Okay, likewise I like to do everything from scratch. Okay, so you guys can join me in this drawing activity. Okay, despite the book already have okay, but I don't feel good to use the book too much, especially for first year students. Okay, without good background, okay, it's going to be haywire. Okay, so I'm going to use price and quantity again. Okay, so make sure you spell it out. Don't be like Mr. Teo. Okay, don't be too lazy. Spell out quantity. Okay, likewise, okay, we have a demand curve, D0. So remember, just now we are done with a movement. Oh yeah, I forgot mentioned earlier on. Okay, law of demand is actually shown here. Okay, your price and your quantity are inversely related. You all still see this? Okay, this is law of demand. Okay, a law of demand is a positive statement. Okay, so make sure you all get the concept of inversely related and directly proportional related for supply correct, or positively related. Okay, so law of demand. Okay, using the demand diagram. So now, okay, I'm going to illustrate what do I mean by non-price factors. Okay, so earlier on, we know that any changes in your prices will lead to a sliding of up and down along your demand curve, right? Something like a seesaw. So, okay, if we are looking at determinants on non-price factor, we are looking at shift. Okay, so please write this down, shift. This will be widely tested. Okay, and this, you are expected to know them by heart. Okay, so how does a shift work? Okay, you can see that your demand curve can either shift to the right or it can shift to the left. Okay, so to put things into perspective, I'm going to show you why is a shift a non-price factor. Okay, so first of all, okay, let's come up with a hypothetical figure here. Okay, $1. Okay, and 1 unit of good, right? Okay, do we see that? So when we illustrate a non-price factor, it simply means that when your price remains the same, what is going to happen to your quantity demanded? See that? Okay, your price remains fixed at $1. No change in price, but quantity demanded goes up. Likewise, okay, the converse can also hold true. Okay, your demand can also go down. Okay, maybe you put 0.5 here. Okay, I ran out of figures. I shouldn't start with 1. Okay, so this is a numerical example to help you understand why is it non-price factor. Okay, why is it a shift? Okay, when there's a shift, we hold price constant. Okay, and we shift the demand curve entirely to the right or to the left. That's why it's called non-price. We hold every point of the price to be the same. Okay, and we just shift the entire curve. Clear so far? Alright, shifts are very important. Okay, so these are the 5 factors that I have for you. Okay, for demand factors. Okay, so next time I will be referencing this to Egypt. Okay, so whenever I say Egypt, okay, I expect all my first year students to know. Clear? Okay, so which are the 5 factors? Okay, we can see that there is expectation of future prices. Okay, although it says prices here, okay, but it simply means future prices. It's not present price. Okay? So how are you going to better make sense of these notes is to know the arrows. Okay, and all these arrows can flip both ways depending on how the extract gives you. So my recommendation is don't memorize the points. Okay, you got to be flexible and know what the extract gives you. So we have expectation of future prices, interrelated good. Okay, when we have interrelated good, we have substitutes and complements. Okay, you may want to make a mental note. Some of the schools, they have another term for this. Substitutes, they call it competitive in demand. Okay, you can make a mental note here. Okay, complements is join in demand. Okay, in the future, I will also relate this concept to derived demand. Okay, this is a third category, derived demand. Okay, I don't think I have the bandwidth to cover this today. I'm not sure whether it's going to be covered. Okay, but I hope I will cover this eventually. Alright, income. So the key difference between income here and income earlier on is down here. There's a change in your income. Earlier on, when you're illustrating movement along your demand curve, there is no change in income. Okay, it's a price factor. So when there is a change in income, it's going to affect your demand curve. I'm going to go through them in totality later. I just quickly run through population and taste and preference. Okay, so some of the popular, I'm going to list down which are the important ones. Okay, the important ones will be these two. Okay, especially for my H2 students. Okay, there is an extension topic for these two. Okay, so for interrelated goods, my H2 students, you may want to pen this down. It's related to cross elasticity of demand. Okay, or XED. You can pen this down here first. Okay, we'll get there in time. Okay, the extension topic for income here will be what we call income elasticity of demand. So you realize that, for demand and supply, there's a lot of layering. If you cannot get the basic right, you cannot get the advanced topics right. So make sure you invest sufficient time here, especially for my year 2s watching this. So I'm going to cover the easy factors first. So we realize that there's taste and preference. Right? Taste and preference is not a price factor. Agreed? There's no change in price. Okay, so the example here is, there is an increase in healthy habit. Okay, and there will be a fall in demand for junk food. Okay, or increase in demand for healthy food also can. Increase demand for healthy food. Make sense? Okay, so from a diagram perspective, it's going to result in a rightward shift. For instance, there's an increase in let's say you are eating more health conscious, eat more brown rice, right? Then in that case, it's going to be a non-price factor. Okay, so your demand curve will shift to the one in green. Okay, population also matters. We can also see that a change in demographics, is going to affect, the demand for a specific good. For instance, when there's aging population, there's going to be an increase in demand for healthcare. Okay, so all things remaining the same, the country is going to experience a rightward shift in the demand curve, for healthcare services. Okay, make sure you label these. Okay, so if you are using healthcare services, then you possibly want to illustrate healthcare. Okay, fair enough. Population. So most of the time, extracts won't tell you population, taste, and preference blatantly, right? So you have to refer or have to make the correct judgment. Which one is the correct one? Okay, expectation of future price. Okay, so if you are a consumer, if you expect future price to go up, what would you do now? Would you buy more now or buy less now?
Buy more now.
Buy more now. Demand will go up. Okay, present demand will go up. This is future price. Okay, so it works both ways. If you expect future price to go down, demand will go down. Alright, so for this two, okay, is a little bit tricky. Okay, I'll go through the less tricky part. Income is fairly straightforward. Okay, when you have higher income, you have higher purchasing power. Okay, so this is likely to increase the present demand of a good. Okay, let's say you want to buy iPhone, okay, fast food. Right? So this is where income changes. Earlier on, I mentioned before, okay, income factor down here, income remains the same. Okay, but when we're looking at income factor here, income goes up. That's why it's a shift. Clear? So there are extended topics here. In the future, we will be learning about the extent of your demand curve shifting. Is it shifting a little bit more? Is it shifting a lot more? Or could it happen when there is an increase in income? It will lead to a fall in present demand. Could it happen? Okay, so the concept of inferior goods will come out in the future. Okay, so this is a YED concept. Alright, next, okay, I'm going to go through the hardest. The hardest is actually XED. Okay, or cross elasticity demand. Not XED. Substitutes and complements. Okay, you have to get the substitutes and complements right first. Okay, where is it? So first of all, okay, there are two goods. Competitive in demand or joint in demand. Or substitutes and complements. So just now we have illustrated the concept of Milo Peng, right? Okay, and tea. Agreed? So let's continue to advance this topic. Okay, I'm going to draw using a diagram. Okay, you can join me in this activity. Like I say, the more you draw, the more comfortable that you're going to illustrate this. Okay, so this is Milo. Okay, and this is tea, right? So for XED, okay, it is always useful to, so not XED, for substitutes and complements, okay, it is always useful to put them together so we can compare the effects. So earlier on, we see that there is a fall in price. No change in demand, P0, Q0. We know that quantity demanded of Milo goes up. Okay, so for the market of tea, what is going to happen here? So just now someone mentioned that okay, tea is a substitute, right? So if you are a consumer, okay, you have the choice of consuming both, but there is a fall in price of Milo. Okay, so obviously you are going to consume more Milo and you are going to consume lesser tea, right? Yes? But are there changes in tea prices? Okay, so for tea, okay, it will be a leftward shift. Do you see that? Okay, so I'm just going to put things into a clearer perspective. Okay, holding your price the same. See? Now we experience a fall in quantity demanded as a result of fall in demand. No change in price of tea. So I'm just going to quickly illustrate okay, how substitutes work. Okay, but not complements work. Before that, okay, I just want you all to pay attention, okay, that it works both ways. Okay, so if price of Milo goes up, okay, quantity demanded for Milo goes down, then there will be an increase in demand for tea. Okay, so it works both ways. So make sure you're comfortable illustrating both ways. Hey, to be frank, I'm not entirely sure whether we can commence with the guided practice today. I don't know, maybe I'm too ambitious. Let's see how it goes, huh? Okay, if not, then we probably just skip and just lump everything next week. I play by ear, I also don't want to dismiss too late. Alright, okay, so far so good. Okay, compliments. So now, name me a complimentary good. All of you, one each. Okay, I will choose the most creative answer. Or rather, what is used jointly?
Okay, I'll go first. Like bread in the morning, the ones that you eat for breakfast.
Okay, bread and what?
Yeah, like those toast,
Yeah, so what do you eat together with bread?
Milo.
Okay, bread and Milo, sure. Or bread and jam, right? Bread and butter. Okay, Raphael and DY, you guys can share.
PlayStation and games.
Okay, PlayStation and games, yeah. Well, right now there's a shortage of PS5. Mr. Teo is looking very hard to buy a PS5. I don't know where to buy. If you can tell me where I can get, okay, I'll buy you a meal, okay? Okay, Raphael?
Toothbrush and toothpaste.
Very good. Okay, so I will just stick with the earlier example of bread and butter. Okay, so the illustration is entirely the same. Okay, so first of all, we want to focus on the movement on, okay, the initial demand curve. Okay, let's see that there's a fall in price of bread, right? Okay, so for butter, okay, what do you think is going to experience? What do you think you're going to experience in the market of butter? Are you going to consume more butter when you consume more bread? So they are consumed jointly, right? Okay, and that being said, okay, are there any changes in price of butter? No change in price of butter, right? So we are expected to see that your butter is going to experience a outward shift, holding the price the same. Okay, like I've said, okay, when you reverse the prices, okay, then when you reverse here, okay, I'm going to change the arrow. Okay, you have to be very familiar with reversing this. Okay, and then demand will go down. Good. Alright, I am going to move on to, okay, I'm done with pretty much demand and supply. Okay, I'm covering this one since I'm here. This one is the hardest out of all. Okay, derived demand. Okay, derived demand works like this. Okay, so most of the students get joint in demand and derived demand mixed up. Okay, so you have to distinguish between the two. So derived demand, okay, normally when we see this, okay, we are looking at, okay, a specific factor of production. Okay, what do we mean by factor of production? So I'll come up with this example. Furniture. Rosewood furniture. Right? Okay, and okay, the factor of production is rosewood. So you can see that, okay, when there is a increase in demand for rosewood furniture due to whatever Egypt reasons, okay, the demand for rosewood is also going to go up together. So this is the biggest difference between joint in demand and derived demand. Joint in demand, okay, you realize that the initial figure is a change in price. Okay, whereas for derived demand, okay, key terms to look out for. There is normally a factor input or a factor of production related. You use rosewood to produce rosewood furniture. And because there's an increase in demand for rosewood furniture, this will lead to a subsequent increase in demand for rosewood. Okay, so pay attention to factor of production. Very highly testable. And the hardest of all. Clear? So I'm going to move on to the easy part. Okay, the easy part will be differentiating demand and quantity demanded. So I will be using these two terms not interchangeably, but I'll be using these two terms fairly popular or fairly frequently. So Quantity demanded is a price factor. It refers to the diagram on the right. Okay, sliding upwards and downwards along the demand curve. Clear? Demand, okay, is a shift. Shifting right or shifting left is not a movement. Okay, so you may want to put here, okay, movement, shift. Okay, you also want to put here non-price factor. So change in demand means that the entire demand curve shift right or shift left. When quantity demanded, we are looking at a movement along the demand curve. There is no shift. And up to here, I still have year 2 students who still cannot get the concept right. Okay, so it's really sad that I still have to spend time to illustrate demand and quantity demanded. Okay, so in a nutshell, okay, this is the summary page to illustrate the key difference between the two. Clear? Alright, okay, I'm going to move on to a break. Okay, and when we come back to the come back from a break, we'll be looking at the better half, which is supply. Okay, and we'll be putting them together on the price adjustment process. Okay, so refresh yourself. Okay, come back in a while. Clear? All right, great, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Okay, so let's do a quick content recap. Okay, so I will just like you guys to type out something, maybe one sentence of what have we covered earlier in the past hour. Okay, it can be anything. I'm not going to judge you for what you type. Just need to make sure that we're on the right track before I introduce the second curve of the day. I haven't covered change in supply yet. Earlier on was demand, right? Okay, so I believe you're illustrating change in demand and change in quantity demanded. Right? I haven't covered supply yet. Price and non-price factors. Use Egypt to memorize non-price factors at cost shift. Good. Okay, so with that, if you know demand, supply comes in easier. Okay, but a lot of students get mixed up between demand and supply, okay, especially if you're new to economics. So let's fall back to the definition again. Okay, so one of the key criteria between these two, okay, is you need to look at who is the economic agent involved. Okay, for demand is always consumer. Okay, for supply, producer. Okay, so it follows the exact same format for demand, okay, just that we are looking at producers. Okay, how are they willing and able to produce at various price over a given time period, ceteris paribus. I want to off my mailbox. Okay, make sure you can distinguish the both. Okay, so most of the time the extract won't tell you demand or supply. You have to deduce yourself. Okay, so for production related, most likely to be supply or quantity supply. Consumer will be demand or quantity demanded. Okay, law of supply I will illustrate with the diagram together. Okay, so with that, I would like you guys to join me in this drawing activity. Price and quantity. So we already have one downward sloping curve called demand, right? So how should your supply curve look like? Can it be downward sloping again? Okay, so it has to be upward sloping. We call this supply. Make sure you label S. Okay, all the curves has a name. Okay, label your axis, label your curve properly. Whenever there's a shift, then you probably want to illustrate, okay, what I mentioned. You can use subscripts here, 0, 1, 2 to illustrate. Okay, so I will continue to reinforce this along the way. So we can see that I'm going to use numerical illustration again. Okay, so we can see that. Okay, so let's say this is $2. Okay, and producers are willing to produce at, for $2, they are willing to produce 2 quantity. Okay, like I say, any point on the supply curve illustrates the willingness and ability to produce. So we can see that at higher price, $3, okay, producers are going to produce more, $3 or 3 quantity. So now, putting this aside, can you all tell me, okay, why is it that producers are going to charge a higher price when they produce more? Or when they produce more, they charge a higher price, whichever. This one you cannot use coffee shop layman term, cheaper or and if you realize Mr. Teo got his mouth clean, see? Now Mr. Teo can smile like a gentleman. Yeah, previously it was so much coffee stain. I also don't dare to smile much. Yeah, but anyway, let's come back. Why is it upward sloping? Okay, like I said, okay, the downward sloping side, okay, we have the substitution and the income effect. Do you all still remember? Substitution and income effect. Okay, but for the likewise for supply is going to be the same. Okay, I'm going to offer you two illustrations. Okay, they won't be tested, but it will give you a good understanding of how is it going to be tested or how is it going to be explained. Okay, the first one, we can see this. So let's say when there's an increase in price, right? From $2 to $3. Right now we're at this point. So if you are a producer, would you be more motivated with higher price or less motivated with higher price to produce more?
More motivated.
Yes, more motivated, right? With higher price, you are going to produce more. So this is how you are going to stick up these 2 points to form the upward movement. There's another illustration. So the first one is what we call incentive. Okay, or profit motivated. Okay, the second one that you want to be concerned about is this. Okay, let's say if you want to increase your production, which you need to, if you increase your production, you need to incur more labor, more capital goods, right? You need to incur higher costs, right? So in order to make up for your higher costs, you need to charge a higher price. Okay, so this is what we call cost factor. So whichever works for you. Okay, this is hardly tested. Okay, but I think it's a good starting point to show you why is it upward sloping. Okay, so law of supply also works here. Okay, it simply tells you that your price and your quantity supplied, they are positively related. Not supply, price and quantity supplied. Okay, it's a movement along your supply curve. Therefore, it illustrates an upward sloping supply curve. Okay, likewise, it can also go down. So just now I showed upwards, right? Okay, it can also go downwards. Don't get me wrong, can also go downwards. So far, so good. Okay, this is fairly simple. So this is what we call a movement. So in demand and supply, it's all about movement and shift. Okay, we need to decide when is a movement and when there is a shift. So more than often, okay, we are tested on shift. Sometimes they can be used in combination. I will show you in a short while. Okay, but like I've said, focus on shift more than movement. So using the same analogy, remember just now for demand, I have covered non-price factor, right? Okay, so I don't think I'll be redrawing this. Okay, I'll just go straight to the supply factor. Okay, so putting aside the demand curve, I just want you to remove this. Okay, so this is what we call changes in your supply or non-price factor. Okay, maybe I'll just redraw this okay, for simplicity's sake. So don't want you guys to, because of the shortcuts I take, you guys are going to pay the price for that. Okay, so please kindly join me in this drawing activity. Yeah, I almost forgot all of you are first year. If it's second year, I'll probably skip this. Okay, first year need to join me in this drawing. Okay, so we have illustrated supply curve as an upward sloping curve, right? Yes? So, when we are looking at changes in your supply, okay, we are looking at keeping your price the same. But what happens to your quantity supply? Okay, so let's call this price and quantity. So we can see that your supply curve can shift either left or right or up or down. Okay, get your directions right. Do you see that? So it simply means that at the same price level, okay, the quantity supply change. So when I'm illustrating this, okay, this is what we call a non-price factor. Holding the price the same. Okay, we are looking at the entire shifting of your supply curve. Okay, or what we call a shift of your supply curve. It's not movement, there's no change in price. So far so good. Now I'm going to move on to the determinants of this. Okay, I'm also possibly going to share some sob stories behind this this diagram. You realize that all this illustration looks really good, right? Yeah, this is actually produced by our in-house artists. Okay, so initially, okay, when we chose WETPIGS, I don't know whether your school use WETPIGS. Do they use WETPIGS? Some use WETPIGS, some don't. Do they use the same? Okay, you guys can verify this when you are learning the factor when you reach a school. So the sob story behind this was initially the WETPIGS. Okay, the piggy illustration was rejected by the publisher. Do you all know why we cannot show piggies here? The answer is actually very funny, but I'll let you all guess. No guess? So the answer is this. Okay, because this publisher has many headquarters. You can read, see? You can read behind many headquarters. Okay, so they have office in Brunei as well. So the reason that they quote was, if we were to print piggies, it will be religiously disturbing or religiously insensitive to Muslim viewers or Muslim readers out there. So we have to convince them that there is no meaning behind these WETPIGS. It has been widely used in school. Yeah, so that's a sob story behind. We managed to push through that. Okay, so WETPIGS. Okay, so these are the 7 factors. I'm going to illustrate which are the ones that are important. Okay, so price of related goods, input prices, government, and sellers in the market. Sometimes they use supply shock as well. It's used interchangeably. So I'll start with the easier one. So are you all following the recent war between Ukraine and Russia? So you read the news, right? It tells you that oil prices goes up, right? Why? Which do you think is the piggy? Which piggy down here do you think is going to attribute to an increase in price? I'll illustrate the increase in price together with the demand curve later. But we can actually attribute to what we call a supply shock or the number of sellers. Why? Because there is disruption in the production of oil. Right? Ukraine is a very oil-rich country, likewise for Russia. So when there's disruption in production, your supply curve is going to shift where? Shift left or shift right? Type it out now. Type it out. When there's disruption in production, supply curve is going to shift. Okay, great. Left. I'm going to go through one of the recent ones. I'm going to go through the other one. Weather. It's fairly common to see weather being used in extracts. Especially we are looking at commodities or agricultural goods. So whenever you read an extract that tells you of commodities, especially soft commodities like rice, like potato or agricultural goods, then we have to be concerned. How does weather comes into the picture? Weather doesn't affect hard commodities like oil, right? So when there is a poor weather or a poor harvest, where is your supply curve going to shift, left or right? Type it out. Holding price the same. Same, left. Good. When there's a good harvest, then supply will shift to the right. So it's always about having the mental awareness. What is the factor and what is the direction of the shift? Likewise for demand. Just now I did not emphasize enough. Okay, so I reckon that we have a good background in demand already, so we push on with supply, and I want you to deduce the direction. Okay, expectation of future prices. This is one of the least used. Least doesn't mean that it won't come out lah. Okay, it will come out in one of your second year case study. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that it won't come out. So, okay, what it simply means if producers anticipate a future fall in future prices, then it makes more sense for them to sell today. Okay, because they can sell at a higher price. Okay, likewise, the opposite also holds. Okay, if they anticipate a future increase in price, then they want to withhold selling presently. Okay, and they want to sell in the future with higher price. Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. Okay, technology simply means what? It simply means that it will increase it will lead to an increase in your supply curve. Why? Because your capital or your factor of production becomes more efficient at every price level. So it's going to shift your supply curve to the right. And most of the time, technology works one way only, increase. I seldom see people testing a fall in technology. Technology can only go one way, okay, increase. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the important parts. Earlier on, I have covered sellers in the market or supply shock, right? Okay, so we can see that this is already been tested. So price of related good. Okay, I want you to look at this. Okay, this is more important. Okay, in fact, this is tested 100% of the time. I haven't seen join in supply being tested. So for the viewers out there, make sure you are able to illustrate what is competitive in supply. Okay, so what do we mean by competitive in supply? I'm going to show you. Okay, you can join me in drawing it. So first of all, we need to deduce two goods that are competitive in supply. If you don't understand what is competitive in supply, then you probably want to come out with two sets of goods that share the same factor resource to produce. Okay, so I will just cut the chase. Okay, so you can see that for competitive in supply, commodities and agricultural goods are used almost always as an example. Okay, so this is rice and this is potato. So my question to all of you is, what kind of resource do they share? That results in competitive in supply. What is a common factor of production? Okay, this is agricultural good, right? Sorry? Land, good. Okay, so land is widely used in farming. So let's see here. So let's say when there's an increase in price of rice, earlier on we have established that quantity supply of rice will go up, right? See? Okay, this is a movement. Now, what is going to be happening to the land of, or what is going to happen to the production of potato? Do you think there will be more land available for potato farming or less land available? Lesser, right? So when there is less land available for potato farming, holding price the same, there's no change in potato prices. What is going to happen to the supply curve for potato?
Shift leftwards.
Shift leftwards, great. Okay, good. Yuki? Leftward shift. This is widely tested. Okay, competitive in supply. Make sure you're able to illustrate. Okay, of course I'm simplifying a lot of things. I haven't shown you the exact effects of what happens here. Okay, the full effect will be like this. Okay, I'm just going to simplify. Later on, I will illustrate. Okay, this is how the full effects works. Okay, there will be an increase in demand for rice, which drives up prices of rice. This is the full effect. Okay, increase in price of rice. Okay, you need to establish with demand and supply factors. I'll elaborate on that. Okay, and you will realize that your prices of potato holding demand the same. Okay, it's going to go up. Okay, no need to, you can skip the demand. You can skip drawing the demand curves for here. No need to draw. Okay, but this is the complete picture. Okay, so in the future, we will be using the complete picture to illustrate. Okay, competitive in supply. So right, the earlier illustration that I've shown you, okay, similar to what I've shown you for complements and substitutes, they are all simplified version. They omit the other curve. Okay, but when you put them together, okay, then it requires you to look deeper. Okay, so with that, okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, input prices. Okay, input prices is going to affect your prices of your goods, right? Or rather, so it's going to affect your supply curve. So for instance, if labor is becoming more expensive, remember input is what? Factor input, or what I call a factor of production. Labor is a factor of production, right? Okay, if labor becomes more costly, would you be able to produce more or produce less? Holding price the same. Labor costs.
Less.
Okay, so it will be lesser. Okay, so a better example that you probably want to illustrate, let's see if I can show you an example. Wait. Yeah, okay, so probably we can use, for instance, farming, back to farming. Okay, if price of fertilizers goes up, okay, or rather the wages of farmers goes up, then holding everything the same, okay, your supply curve is going to shift to the left. Okay, because of higher cost of production. So the keyword that you want to pen this down, please pen this down, very important. Okay, so for input prices, it will normally relate to COP. Factor of production will relate to cost of production. Cost of production. So I'll be using FOB and COP very frequently. So make sure you are able to illustrate that. COP is your cost of production. Alright, so for government policies here, okay, you may want to pen this down. It's called tax and subsidy. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, I did not manage to insert this in the earlier draft in the book. Tax and subsidy. Okay, so tax and subsidy, okay, we'll be going through this in depth in a separate topic. Okay, it's actually in your book. Can't recall what is the page number. Let me see. I think it's give me a second. EIM. Okay, for the viewers out there, tax and subsidy, this one. Okay, here, page 19 onwards, tax and subsidy. Okay, so this is also going to be challenging. Okay, it's an extension topic of your supply. Okay, I forgot to illustrate this. Okay, this is an extension topic. So in a nutshell, okay, a tax will drive up cost of production. Okay, and a subsidy will lower the cost of production. Okay, I will elaborate these two in depth, okay, in time to come. Okay, so we'll slowly build our concepts towards there. Clear? So a tax will drive up cost of production, subsidy lower cost of production. So I'm going to quickly illustrate. I'm going to close this. Important, Likewise for supply, okay, we need to distinguish between the two. Okay, so change in supply, or what we call non-price factor, will cause a shift. Okay, whereas changes in quantity supplied, or what we call price factor, is what we call a movement. So this is what I mean by differentiating supply and quantity supplied, demand and quantity demanded. Quantity demanded or quantity supplied is always a movement, it's a price factor. Supply and demand is a change in your demand and supply. So far so good? Okay, I'm going to go on to the hardest part today. The hardest part today is to stitch them up together. Okay, I'll probably ask you to join me in this drawing activity. Okay, let's draw this together again. Okay, drawing is for your good, then you can understand better. Okay, so remember, whenever we illustrate demand and supply concepts, we never ever draw a single graph or a single curve alone. It has to be paired together with the other half. So if you draw a demand curve, make sure you combine it with a supply curve. When we draw a supply curve, make sure we combine it with a demand curve. Okay? So for those who are relatively new, okay, you can probably borrow concepts of what you have learned in secondary school, okay, which is known to be simultaneous equation. Okay, in higher level economics, okay, simultaneous equation is widely used. Okay, so we have price and quantity that we want to establish. Okay, therefore we need to have two different curves so that they will have an intersection. But if you are not good with math, it's also fine, so long as there are two curves, we can have price, equilibrium price and quantity. So far so good? So let's put them together. Label them, label your diagram. Okay, show your equilibrium price and quantity properly. P0, Q0. So now name me one random good. Okay, I'm going to use that example to illustrate. Quick. This is your time to use your good. Anything that you like to, burning desire to share, what kind of good that you want? Maybe I use DY's example of PS5, maybe PlayStation, gaming console. Okay, it just so happened that I cannot get a PS5 now, that's why I'm very sad. Yeah? Are y'all familiar with PS5? PlayStation 5, huh? Alright, so now, okay, can you all name me, okay, a factor that is going to, okay, that's not a good example. Alright, so now I'm going to illustrate this. For instance, okay, there is a increase in price of Xbox. This is hard, Okay, increase in price of Xbox. Can you all tell me what is going to happen to the market of PS5? So this is what is going to happen in case studies. So first of all, you need to look at, okay, what is Xbox? How is Xbox related to PS5, right? Is it going to be related in demand or supply? How is your demand or supply going to be affected? After that, we want to find out equilibrium price and quantity. So now, first of all, is this a demand or supply factor? Price of Xbox.
Demand.
Is a demand, right? So which part of Egypt is tested? Which part of Egypt? All of you brought up demand, good. Okay, but which part of demand is tested?
The substitute. Good.
Okay, which alphabet?
G.
Good. Okay, so we are concerned about goods. Okay, and we identify that this is a substitute, right? So we have to be very quick in determining what is the factor here. Okay, so this is an Egypt, a G factor. So next, what is going to happen to the market? What is going to happen to the market for PS5?
Demand of PS5 will increase.
Right. So earlier on, we have actually I've shown you this illustration. Okay, so when we use competitive in demand, right? Okay, so when there's an increase in price, okay, of good A, it is going to result increase in price of Milo is going to result in a increase in demand for tea. We are going to use the same concept here. Okay, so demand is going to shift to the left. So this is where it starts to get tricky. Okay, so up to here, everyone, so far so good? Okay, I'm going to illustrate a story. Okay, so the story is what we call PAP. Anybody knows what's PAP? Not the man in white, obviously. Okay, so please write this down. It's called price adjustment process. Man, okay, this coursework has nothing to do with political alignment. Okay, so we can actually see that in one glance, we can see that the demand curve is going to cut the new demand curve. Okay, make sure you illustrate with a shift. It's going to cut the supply curve down here, right? Okay, and we'll have a higher equilibrium price and quantity. So there is a full extensive story behind this. Okay, I'm going to show you how we are going to elaborate. So the first part that you want to illustrate is before P1 and Q1 happens. We know that when there's an outward shift in your demand curve, okay, at your constant price, okay, we see that your quantity demanded, okay, let's say Q2 here. Okay, your Q2 will exceed Q0. Do we agree? Okay, so at every P0, your quantity demanded exceeds your quantity supplied. Are you all following me? Okay, we can see that every point on your demand curve reflects the willingness and the ability to buy, right? So when there's an outward shift in your demand curve at P0, okay, your quantity demanded, or rather at P0, your quantity demanded is Q2. Quantity supply is Q0. When your quantity demanded exceeds your quantity supply, okay, this will result in a shortage of PS5. Yes? Shortage of PS5? So what happens when there is a shortage of PS5? Okay, so I want you to refer back to the book. Okay, the book I will illustrate will be illustrating the concept of SIR. Okay, do you see? Okay, this Englishman down here, SIR. Okay, this is what we know as the function of price. Okay, I'm going to illustrate how is the shortage cleared, or how your new equilibrium is achieved. Okay, we are looking at, for every intersection is an equilibrium point. Okay, so be patient, listen to me how I'm going to illustrate this. Okay, so now let's come back here. Okay, we see that there's a shortage, agreed? So let's say if you are a hardcore gamer like Mr. Teo, okay, you really want PS5, but there is a shortage. Okay, what would you do? Okay, so I want you to observe this point. I'm going to change. I'm going to put an X here. So people like Mr. Teo is going to offer a higher price. You can see here, if I mark it to the left side, yeah, I call this P0 prime, right? Okay, so hardcore gamers like Mr. Teo will be offering a higher price, or willing to pay a higher price for PS5. Okay, so this is what we call signaling. Okay, Mr. Teo is going to signal his willingness to buy at a higher price. Now we can see that at a higher price, P0 prime, okay, your quantity supply goes up a bit. Do you see that? Very, very small. Why? Okay, because producers are incentivized. Okay, Sony company is incentivized, okay, to produce PS5. Although this is not the correct story now, okay, there's a global shortage of PS5 because of supply reason, not demand reasons. Okay, but I'm just using this as a hypothetical example. Okay, so we can see the I word coming out, incentivize. Okay, so the higher price actually incentivizes producers for producing more. So now you can see that there is still a shortage, right? Do you see this? But is this shortage higher or lower? Bigger or smaller as compared to the initial shortage? Bigger or smaller?
Smaller.
Smaller. So we realize that with one round of signaling and incentivizing, okay, there's still going to be a prevailing shortage, but the shortage is going to be lesser, smaller. So we realize that, okay, since there's still a shortage, there are more hardcore gamers like there's above Mr. Teo's level. Okay, they are going to signal to Sony that they want to offer a higher price to buy. So this cycle goes on indefinitely, okay, until P1 and Q1 is achieved. So we can see that as an initial shift in your demand curve, there are a few things happening. There's signaling and there's incentivizing. I haven't mentioned the last alphabet, which is rationing. Okay, ration. What does ration means? Okay, ration simply means that some of the gamers are going to be priced out of the market. Okay, in war times, okay, you realize that resources are scarce, right? That's why there's a concept of rationing. Okay, but this is used slightly differently. Okay, so I'm just going to use an example. Okay, so I think DY here also share a common interest in gaming, right? So for instance, okay, DY, unlike Mr. Teo, okay, he's willing to pay. No, he's able. He's willing to buy PS5, but he does not have the ability to afford that, right? So you can actually see that people like DY, because of higher price, okay, they are going to be rationed out of the market. Fall in quantity demanded. With a higher price, quantity demanded goes down. So I'm just going to simplify this few process. For a price adjustment process, okay, it always happens with an initial change or shift. So in this case, it's an increase in demand. Then we are probably going to identify whether there's a shortage or surplus. In this case, this is a shortage. Okay, so the shortage is going to trigger the SIR part. Okay, so we realize that upon a shortage, okay, there will be two concurrent movements. Okay, so it will be exerting an upward pressure on price like that. They will be crawling slowly along your demand and supply curve. So it is a shift that causes two consecutive movements along your demand and supply curve until your equilibrium price is met and cleared at P1 and Q1. Okay, so you have to be clear, it's shift that actually results in two consecutive movement. Okay, so when you illustrate PAP, okay, you need the SIR process in full. But in selected case studies, especially for case studies, there are 2 marks, 4 marks. Okay, we do not need the extensive storytelling of signaling, incentivizing, and rationing. So the simplified version, okay, please pen this down. Okay, PAP simplified. Okay, let me repeat again. PAP does not mean people action party. It means price adjustment process. Okay, a simplified price adjustment process will simply require you to identify a shift of either a demand or supply curve, resulting in a surplus or shortage, okay, followed by upward or downward pressure on price. You don't need to you don't need the grandmother story of, you know, send a signal, incentivize, rationing. Okay. Okay, so what did I mention? Yeah, upward or downward pressure on price, on equilibrium price. So this is exceptionally useful in case study. Okay, that does not require extensive PAP. Okay, for my H2 students, the essay part, okay, this is important. Especially when it's questions that's dealing with surplus or shortage. So far so good. So I'm going to go through another illustration. Okay, you can join me in this activity. Make sure you label correctly. Downward sloping is demand, upward sloping is supply. Don't blindly memorize. Show the equilibrium price, quantity. So just now we have shown a shortage, right? And now let's look at how are we going to illustrate a surplus. Can anybody tell me what will cause a surplus to happen? Which factor will cause a surplus to happen? A bit tricky, right? I just changed my question a little bit. Hey, people are caught off with their pants down. Okay, in order for surplus to happen, it must be satisfied with a fall in demand or an increase in supply. Right? Okay, just now was a shortage. A shortage is an increase in demand or a fall in supply. Okay, so for surplus to happen, okay, now let's pick. Okay, maybe we can call this a beef market for beef. Right? So now let's try a WETPIGS factor. Or maybe I'll use rice. Okay, so we can actually see that what will cause an increase in supply of rice? Which of the WETPIGS do you think is going to work? Type out now. After this, we'll call this a day already. Okay, so there could be a good weather, right? Good weather is going to result in a good harvest. Supply of your rice is going to go up. So I'm going to show you the reverse application. Okay, so I can afford to speed up. Okay, it's going to use the same approach. You can see that at the prevailing price level, there is going to be your quantity supplied exceeds your quantity demanded. Are you all following me so far? Okay, so this is what I call a surplus. So now what happens when there's a surplus? How is a downward pressure in price going to happen? Now, put yourself into the shoe of a producer. What happens when you have a surplus of rice, perishable good, that you can't keep? You need to dispose them fast, right? So you realize that at the prevailing price level, your quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded. Meaning to say, no one is going to buy more from you at P0. So what should you do when they are saddled okay, or when you have too much excess goods, in order to clear the surplus.
You'll start selling at like a lower price.
Exactly. Okay, so you realize that, okay, the producers will start to lower price. Okay, they will signal their intention to sell at a lower price to the consumers. Consumers receiving the signal will be incentivized to consume at a lower price. Quantity demanded goes up. So far so good? Okay, so this will go on indefinitely until P1 and Q1 is achieved. Okay, at the same time, we realize that some of the producers, okay, will drop out of the market. Okay, quantity supply goes down. Why? Okay, because of too excessive low price, okay, they are probably going to be less profitable, so they choose to produce lesser. Okay, so this is the full story using PAP to illustrate a clearance of the surplus. Okay, so no need to be too concerned. I hardly see PAP being tested in such extensive means. So most of the time it is a simplified version of a PAP. Simplified. Remember what I mentioned about simplified? This. Okay, you identify the shift in your supply curve. Supply shifts to the right. This results in a surplus. And with a surplus, we don't need to use SIR. Okay, all we need to is just to quickly move on to the upward and downward pressure on price. When there's a surplus, there's a downward pressure on price. Clear? Okay, and state where is your final equilibrium price, P1 and Q1. Alright, so far so good. Questions? Especially if you have not learned this before, it could be quite daunting. Okay, but like I've said, our approach is very hands-on. Okay, I only talk about things that are going to give marks, okay, or likely to give marks. Okay, so I skip a lot on factors, okay, because those will be adequately covered in school, okay, in depth. Okay, so remember, don't get caught napping in school. Okay, make sure you work the program and your schoolwork concurrently. Alright, so for exam purpose, okay, you will need to be concerned about the demand and supply framework, especially factors that affect demand and supply. So don't get confused between demand and supply factors. Demand is Egypt. Supply is WETPIGS. Demand, consumer. Supply, producers. Okay, demand and supply, the similarity between both of them is a shift. It's a non-price factor. Okay, movement is hardly tested. If movements are ever tested, they'll be tested in the future under price elasticity or under price adjustment process of signaling, incentivizing, and rationing. Okay, which is point 2, PAP, price adjustment process. So I'll be using PAP very often in your scripts. Okay, if I write PAP missing, it doesn't mean that okay I'm politically inclined to some other parties. It means that you're missing in some words there. Okay, that results in upward downward pressure on price missing. The SIR framework I have used earlier on, signaling, incentivizing, and rationing. Oh, I forgot to illustrate. The rationing part comes in here. With lower price, okay, quantity demanded goes up. Okay, so it simply tells you that there's greater affordability, okay, for consumers. Okay, therefore you see, quantity demanded goes up. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of gems that I like to share, but sometimes it runs out of me. Okay, so next week, okay, I will probably touch a little bit about total expenditure and total revenue framework. Okay, it is widely used together with price elasticity of demand, okay, which is the following lesson. I will also be covering a little bit about price reduction policies. Okay, they are increasingly popular. Okay, so this is going to be covered together with price control in the future. So there are a lot of extension topics from demand and supply. So, but you have to get your basics right first. Okay, and next week, if time permits, okay, we'll focus a lot more on time practice. Okay. Okay, so with this, okay, I'm going to call it a day. Okay, if you have questions for me, okay, please stay back and ask. For the viewers out there, okay, likewise, okay, you can stay back, you can drop me a comment.